This day in sports history. Happy Independence Day! This day in sports history is a member of the Sports History Network, a group of sports history nuts and more than 30 podcasts dedicated to sports and sports history. You can find more info and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. And of course, it's July 4th, and on this day in 1939, Lou Gehrig said goodbye to Yankees fans in an emotional farewell speech. It had been 2 weeks since Gehrig had received the devastating news about his ALS diagnosis. He had been feeling bad for more than a year, and it had started to show on the field early in the 1939 season. When he reported to spring training prior to the season, he was feeling weak and listless, and he just couldn't work himself into his usual form. By May 2nd, Gehrig was hitting only .143, and he removed himself from the lineup after playing 2,130 consecutive games. Now, that's really the thing that made Gehrig's disease even more shocking, right? He was the Iron Horse, baseball's Iron Man, a man who took care of his body by not drinking or smoking. He didn't chase women like his teammate Babe Ruth did. In fact, he was the polar opposite of the Babe. Gehrig's wife remarked once that Lou could not understand how Babe Ruth could stay out all night, drink, carouse, lose count of the number of hot dogs that he ate, and then roll into the ballpark and pound long home runs like he did. Gehrig was a ball player who took care of himself, was strong in body, but humble in character. And yet, he had been given a diagnosis of a disease that would shrivel his body and take his life in less than 2 years. On this day, though, looking a bit weary, he was honored at Yankee Stadium with gifts and speeches given by teammates past and present. And then he stepped to the microphone and, after taking several seconds to compose himself, delivered this message.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. That I might have been given a bad break, but I've got an awful lot to live for. Thank you.
It would be the last time that Yankee fans would see him. His number 4 would become the first retired number in sports history. He died less than 2 years later, on June 2nd, 1941. So let's go to 1985 and a most improbable home run to extend an already extended game. This event really took place in the early morning hours of the 5th, but the game started on the 4th, so I'm rolling with that. The Atlanta Braves were hosting the New York Mets at Fulton County Stadium. The Mets scored a run in the top of the 9th to tie the game at 8 to send it to extra innings. Both teams scored a pair in the 13th. New York added a run in the 18th, and with the Braves out of pinch hitters, resorted to sending pitcher Rick Camp to the plate to pinch hit with 2 outs and no one on in the bottom of the inning. With no balls and 2 strikes, this happened.
Ernie, if he hits a home run to tie this game, this game will be certified as absolutely the nuttiest in the history of baseball. It'll be an 0-2 pitch. And he is at the deep left. Heat goes back. It is gone. Holy cow. Oh, my goodness. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Rick Camp. Rick Camp. I don't believe it. Remember what I just said. If he hits a home run, that certifies this game as the wackiest, wildest, most improbable game in history.
So to put Camp's homer into perspective, he played 9 seasons, all with the Braves. In that span, he had a total of 13 hits and 175 at-bats. And this was the only home run he ever hit. Unfortunately, this game did not have a happy Hollywood ending for the Braves. Camp's homer extended the game another inning, but the Mets scored 5 in the 19th and won 16-13, with Camp also taking the loss as the pitcher of record. On this day in 2009, former Tennessee Titans and Baltimore Ravens quarterback Steve McNair was found murdered. After spending 13 seasons in the NFL, McNair retired in April 2008. The man who was third in the Heisman voting as a senior at 1AA Alcorn State in 1994, the third pick in the 1995 NFL Draft by the Houston Oilers, who would move to Nashville in 97 and become the Titans. The quarterback that led his team to Super Bowl 34 in 2000 and came within a few inches of the Lombardi Trophy. The guy who won the league MVP in 2003 after leading the league in QB rating was the man that was found dead in his Nashville condo on this day in 2009. His mistress, Sahel Kazemi, was found dead with him. After 4 days of investigating the crime, Nashville police concluded it was a murder-suicide. 2 days prior to the murders, Kazemi had been ticketed for a DUI with McNair in the passenger seat. The next day, Kazemi had reportedly purchased a 9mm semi-automatic pistol from a convicted felon in the Dave & Buster's parking lot where she worked. That gun was said to be the one found at the scene under her body. Police say she shot McNair 4 times, twice in the chest, once in each temple, and then turned the gun on herself. But many family members, friends, and others doubted the conclusions of the Nashville PD. One of those is former Nashville police officer Vincent Hill, who has written 3 books about the case. There's also a podcast produced by Sports Illustrated called Fall of a Titan that came out in 2018, exploring Hill's and others' theories on the case. If you have any interest in learning more about why there are doubts about this being a murder-suicide, you should check it out. It doesn't come to conclusions, but it does shed a lot of doubt on what the Nashville PD came up with in just 4 days of investigating. When Steve McNair was found dead on this day, he was 36 years old. Kazemi was 20. July 4th has been a big day for big fights. Let's talk about 2 of those. First, in 1910, heavyweight champ Jack Johnson stepped in the ring with James J. Jeffries. This was really more about what happened before this fight and the reason behind it than what actually happened in the ring on this day. So, if you've been a long-time listener to this dish, then you'll remember the December 26th edition when I talked about Jack Johnson becoming the first black fighter to win the heavyweight title, beating Tommy Burns in Sydney, Australia. A furor arose after that fight for a white challenger to come forth to beat Jack Johnson. The fight on this day, 18 months later, is the first of the Great White Hope fights. James J. Jeffries was a retired fighter. Maybe not officially, but he had not fought professionally since 1904 and had gotten a little doughy on his alfalfa farm in California. The writer Jack London had witnessed the Johnson-Burns fight on Boxing Day 1908, and after watching Johnson pummel Burns and then taunt the crowd, London put out the public call to Jeffries to get off his couch and out of his produce patch and get back into the ring, as he put it, to put the Black Othello back in his place. In fact, it was Jack London who coined the term Great White Hope to encourage Jeffries back to the ring. But Jeffries really wasn't interested. He had finished as an undefeated fighter, and he was content to leave it like that. But as Johnson continued showing up and beating up white farmhands in boxing matches across the West, Southwest, and East, Jeffries finally decided to answer the call and jump back into the ring. A fierce battle of promoters ensued, and it was Tex Rickard who came away with it, setting it up in Reno, Nevada on July 4th, 1910, and he labeled it the Fight of the Century. The folks of Reno built a 20,000-seat outdoor venue specifically for the fight, and by the time it rolled around, they had sold 15,760 of those tickets. The crowd was mostly Caucasian, with the chant, "Jeff, it's up to you," resonating throughout the pre-fight atmosphere. When Jack Johnson stepped into the ring, he was a 3-1 underdog, but mostly because the white crowd did not want to bet on the black man to win. But Johnson brimmed with confidence. Jeffries climbed between the ropes looking tired and haggard. Ringside hopes faded soon after. The fight was scheduled for 41 rounds. They would not need nearly that many. Jeffries' punches never found their mark, parried by Johnson for most of the fight. Johnson had little problem punching past Jeffries' defenses, and by the 14th, a still fresh Johnson was pounding his frustrated counterpart with jabs and taunts. In the 15th, Johnson put Jeffries on the mat for the first time in his career. Jeffries would rise twice more to take more punishment, and twice more be sent back to the canvas. The white spectators ringside pleaded with the referee to stop the fight and not let Johnson knock him out. They still wanted to salvage a little bit of dignity, apparently. After the third knockdown, Jeffries' lights dimmed and the fight was over. The White Crusade had failed. On this day in 1919, it was another heavyweight bout. This was Jess Willard versus Jack Dempsey. Willard actually turned out to be the so-called Great White Hope, having defeated an aging and out-of-shape Johnson in a hot fight in Cuba in 1915. Willard was 6 feet 6 inches tall, and he had taken on all challengers since winning the title 4 years earlier. He'd also killed boxer Bull Young in a fight in 1913. By comparison, Dempsey was 6 feet 1 inch and a former railroad hobo that developed the skill of knocking out guys quickly. His 26 first-round knockouts are more than any other fighter, but he was outweighed by 65 pounds in this one. This fight was held in Toledo, Ohio, and it was a blazer of a day with the mercury above 100 degrees. Dempsey hit Willard first and hit him hard. A shot to the heart and then a shot to the jaw put Willard on the mat in a hurry. The punch had also broken Willard's jaw. Willard continued to get up and get knocked down, a total of 7 times before he took the 10 count to the limit. It was another first-round knockout for Dempsey, and Willard's jaw was broken in 7 places, and he'd lost 4 teeth. Dempsey exited the ring and headed back to his locker room. Hang on a second. The bell had rung while the referee's count was going, meaning that Willard had been saved by the bell. He was dragged back to his corner, and he was ready to fight again. Once Dempsey found his way back to the ring, he was able to dispense of Willard in the 3rd round with a constant pounding barrage of punches. Willard was left dazed and sobbing. Dempsey became the new heavyweight champ. And a couple of quickies to end on. In 1981, Bjorn Borg's streak of 5 consecutive Wimbledon titles was ended when a 22-year-old John McEnroe beat him in 4 sets to win his first Wimbledon title. McEnroe actually kept his temper under control in the final, but he had been quite the brat in his matches leading up to it. He had thrown temper tantrums and volleyed verbal abuse towards officials that eventually left him facing a substantial fine and suspension if he did not behave in the final. On this day in 1999, it was an All-American final at the All-England Club. Pete Sampras beat Andre Agassi in straight sets to win his 6th Wimbledon title, topping Borg's previous record. And it seems only fitting to polish this episode off with what happened on this day in 2003, when former Chicago Bear William the Fridge Perry competed in the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest at Coney Island. By looking at the man, you know that he can eat. He just can't eat really fast. The Fridge only managed to down 4 hot dogs and dropped out after just 5 minutes. It was Kobayashi winning that year with 44.5 dogs in what was then a 12-minute contest. And time now for today's non-sports fun fact, and this one is guaranteed to make you go, "Aw." Prairie dogs greet each other with kisses. That's all for today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.